The key thing is you really do want to be working with a leadership team who is committed to this and not just doing it because they're ticking a box.
Hello and welcome to Minter Dialogue, episode number 316. Today is Sunday the 24th of February 2019, and this interview is with James Bidwell. James is the author of the best-selling Disrupt. He's also chair of the Innovation and Tech Trends Observatory Springwise and co-founder of Reset, a leading transformation and innovation consultancy for the disruption economy based out of the UK. In this conversation with James, we discuss and spar about the most important new tech trends, some of the key lessons about innovation from his book Disrupt, what leaders need to do to succeed in digital transformation, and how tech can help change and improve the world. Welcome to the Minter Dialogue podcast, where we discuss branding and all things digital. I am Minter Dial, your host, and you'll find the show notes on my eponymous site, minterdial.com. Enjoy the show. James Bidwell, how about that? How lovely to have you on my show. You and I have known each other for a few years, and the funny course of nature has led us to be on something of a similar path. You're a founder, entrepreneur. You have been looking as an observatory of new tech, and you wrote a best-selling book, Disrupt, 100 Lessons in Business Innovation, which was published in just November 2017. So, James, in your own words, who are you?
That's a very good question. The first thing is it's lovely to see you again and to be with you on the podcast. And as you say, I think it's well over 30 years since we last connected. You don't look any different, and it's great to be, as you said, also on a similar path in life now, but having been on very different journeys, I suspect. But my life now is as the chair and owner of a business called Springwise. Springwise is the leading innovation intelligence platform in the world, which tracks startups and innovators from around the world and publishes the best every day on its website. And I also do a couple of other things. I have a business called Reset, which is a consultancy that helps people understand the future and organizations figure out how to leverage innovation and transformation in order to create businesses which are fit for purpose in this very fast changing world. And then my final string to my bow is I work a little bit in investment in helping disruptive investments and invest in technologies and businesses which are, first of all, disrupting the status quo and secondly, making the world a better place.
Well, that's a wonderful combination and indeed many synergies between what you do, because Springwise allows you to sort of have the binoculars to see what's happening in the future, and then you can just plow money into the ones that are going to win. I mean, as much as one can ever make a bet like that.
So much easier said than done. But I think what is really fascinating is having the leverage of Springwise, where we have informers or spotters in over 190 countries. So we really have this very, very different lens on the world. And Springwise has been going since 2002, so it has a great network of people who are engaged in what we're doing and who send us great ideas every day to research and then publish the best ones. And as you say, the investment game is a little bit more tricky, but it certainly informs everything we do. And being able to look at the outliers on a daily basis, it does help us see things as they're emerging almost in real time, as well as seeing the most incredible endeavors of people all around the world who are mostly seeking to, see if they can make the world a better place slightly. And that, of course, is something that we all need a lot in this day and age.
It most certainly is. So, James, the remarkable thing is I certainly came across Springwise well before understanding that you were involved. When I was working at NetExplo, an observatory of new tech in France, it was one of the sources and one of the places I would want to check out for what you were coming across. So Tell us a little bit more about how you came into Springwise, and then I'm really interested to find out how Springwise works and understand maybe the model in terms of making an observatory, which is what I would think of it as, on new tech function.
It's a great way of looking at it, actually, as an observatory. So, I mean, the story, Springwise started as a blog in 2002 and became very successful. It was one of the first blogs out there that was looking at what was new and looking at innovators and outliers. And it never really got a business model behind it. So it kept publishing great content. And it was founded by a guy called Rainier Evers, who has become a good friend. And 5 years ago, I was looking at changing my direction of travel from working in big corporates and effectively working for other people, not really being the master of my own destiny. And I was thinking of what I might do. And I met Rainier, and he was he was open to suggestions of selling me Springwise. So after about 6 months of discussions, he said, "Yeah, you're a good guy to take this on," and I took it on, and I've learned an enormous amount since. But it was born out of me wanting to make quite a radical change in my life, and it became an opportunity for me to kind of build out other business interests on my own terms, which has been so far very successful and great fun, albeit with many rocky moments on the way through. And Springwise is really simple in that it has this great network, which is testament to my forebears in the Springwise who built it up over time, and a really quite a significant audience across the world. So it has more readers in America than it does in Europe, for example, although we're based in London. And the idea is to bring the latest innovation ideas and inventions from business schools, research departments, startup academies, in real time to our readers and our audiences. And so the model is we have spotters who spot, send us the ideas. We then have real people, so we don't have any kind of tech involved in the selection process. That's all done in old-fashioned editorial. In an editorial way, and then we have writers who research, make sure that they're real innovations and that they stack up and that they're actually they're not just someone flying a kite and trying to get onto Springwise. And then we publish very quickly, so we publish 3 a day. We write 2 or 3 paragraphs about them. We say where they're from, why they're relevant, and how they connect with other innovations. So over time, you can imagine that we built up a huge kind of set of information and intelligence about which now allows us to kind of spot emerging trends sort of before they happen, if you like. And so it's a very simple, and it's on a digital platform at springwise.com. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out to around 70,000 people, which is free. And then after that, there's a subscription model behind it to make sure that we can all eat. And we go from strength to strength. And that's really how it works.
The spotters, what's in it for them?
So spotters, the answer to that question is different things are in it for different people. So lots of spotters like to be featured on Springwise. So Springwise has something of a cult following. It's because it's been around for so long. It's well known amongst the people who know it. And there's a sort of kudos about being on there, saying spotted by Minter, for example, on the homepage of Springwise. That's kind of quite a big thing. Other people are, we get a lot of students who are sort of in the know and looking around, and they need a little bit of extra cash, so they get a little bit of extra cash if their spotting is published. Some people do it every single day, and they do it as a kind of a mini income. So we give a little stipend to people if something's published. We have a guy in Mumbai who sits and takes photographs of the local papers every day and spots things and sends them in, and sometimes we publish them, sometimes we don't. So there's all sorts of different reasons, and I think one of the attractive things is the very eclectic mix of people who spot, and they're real people. So we're not the form of journalism where someone sits in the room and just surfs the internet. We're completely the old-fashioned way of real people sending us real ideas, which we get to our customers in real time.
It makes a lot of sense, and it is very absolutely the same type of model as NetExplo, something I really appreciated in your book, James, with Disrupt, is this notion of the diversity of locations where these things are made. In other words, not everything is born in Silicon Valley. And so you have, from around the world, which involves sometimes a very cultural context through which or because of which the innovation comes around.
So I'm really keen that there are two things we do. We care deeply about full geographical coverage, and we look a lot particularly at the moment, there's a lot coming from Africa, there's a lot coming from India. Maybe not extraordinarily, but Australia and New Zealand punch massively above their weight. Clearly, there's still quite a lot out of the West Coast and from the US across the board. But we care a lot about that geographical split so that we get a really good balance. So something that's happening in Sao Paulo is just as relevant as something that's happening in San Francisco. And if it comes from Ecuador or Bolivia, I'm really excited to see things coming from there. So that's really, really important. And I think that depth of coverage is something that does really define the Springwise kind of brand, if you like. And the other thing to say on that is that we are not just about tech. So, and I think actually we become more and more relevant as the tech backlash is fueling up at the moment. And we really have cared always about innovations that are analog and that are thinking about life in the most simple terms. So an example of that would be in Cape Town, an amazing lady developed some backpacks for kids, which were solar powered in that they, on the back of them, they had a little solar panel. And then at the end of the day, they would be able to get back to their homes and they didn't have light for homework. So they took the solar panel off the back of the backpack and that turns into a little light for them to read by in the evening. So, and the backpacks were made of recycled garbage bags picked up by ladies in the slum that they lived in. So you really, that kind of stuff is not only incredible endeavor, but also incredible intelligence and positive change. And for me to be in a business that is allowing oxygen for that kind of innovation, interestingly, that was picked up by the Red Bull Academy, and they did a big order, and also Bill Gates mentioned it. And we believe that both of those were because this had appeared on Springwise. So again, that kind of having that impact is all you really need, isn't it?
It certainly is, James. And one of the things that's very apparent in reading your book is it seems that many of the innovations are laced with responsibility.
So that is a very strong personal passion and point of view that I have. So I was as you know, in marketing and running businesses for a long time, but always sort of in the face of the consumer. And for a while now have been predicting and thinking that not only are we absolutely consuming far too much stuff, but also that the businesses that will thrive in the future will be businesses that put responsibility, both environmental and social, at the heart of what they are doing and at the heart of their purpose. So, and so when I was looking at the kind of innovations that we wanted to feature in the book and thinking about that, I guess I took a slightly future view and ensured that message was coming across. So if there's a teaching, which would be far too much, although it is called 100 Lessons in Business Innovation, it would be that that we all need to think about life in through that lens, and therefore the book is, you can see also from the cover, it's kind of a green eco-y looking cover, but it's not. These are real examples, and it's certainly not it's not preaching, but it is just observing that there is innovation which is, as you say, laced with these more positive change messages out there all around the world. And there are amazing people creating things that are going to help us change the world.
Another message that struck me in your book, nice and hard, because I had to read the sentence a couple of times, was the money is in the content providers, not the content producers. Use words to that effect. And in other words, the people who are curating and distributing the content is where the money is, as opposed to the people who are producing the content. And you talk about that with regard to influencers and the way companies are trying to drive their business. And so at some level, I was like, oh, well, that's exactly what Springwise is. they're not creating the innovations, but they are certainly selecting the ones that are most interesting and making money from that.
So I think that what I wrote about was in reference, I think, more to the major tech businesses who have basically cornered the market for distribution and therefore the advertising dollars. Interestingly, Springwise now is not really in the advertising market. We have a few sponsorships, but it's just not a viable business proposition. The creation and the journalism is very, very important to what we do. But the curation is also very, very important. And we do actually communicate and talk to all the people who we are writing about. So we aim to be a champion, if you like, for the innovators. I wish I could tell you that it was a fantastically profitable business model. It feels sometimes like it's a business, it matters a lot. Therefore, we continue to do it. Certainly, there are other things that are more lucrative that I've done and do also do. But in a way, it informs everything, and it keeps us honest, because it lets us know every single day that there are people out there trying. And I do think genuinely that we are slightly ahead of the market. And I think as the tipping point comes, and we listened last week to Attenborough and Prince
Davos,
talking about all of these things that we know, but we fail to do something about. I think that is definitely there's a moment in time coming where this kind of content will be more and more appreciated, and people are not just looking for the next tech thing that's going to make everyone money and only money, and not care a damn about making the world a better place. As an example is these bicycles in China that are turning into just landfill hell because they're being left all over the place. Right. I think there's a business called Fo, which is just, a ridiculously damaging for the environment, and actually has now gone bankrupt, which is probably deserved to. And, and we're not, so I think the moment there's still, of course, the outrageous valuations for the Ubers, Airbnbs and Facebooks and all of those guys, but we'll hit a tipping point where people look for simplicity and look for organizations or ideas which are both improving people's lives and I mean, environmentally, socially, as well as making money. And I know that all of those companies would argue that they improve people's lives, but they do so at massive cost to our world, which cannot go on. So I don't know quite I can't remember the question. I've been ranting, but
it's good. It's good. So, thinking of this notion of curation, first, there's how do you sift through so many fascinating things and come up with what is the trend? Because, how do you compare VR for cooling burn victims with a backpack that has a battery pack?
Yeah. So I think what's great is the inbound is highly informative. So we are, although we do search as well, so we do source innovations, and we have teams who will kind of go out and look for certain themes particularly if any of our customers are interested in them, more interesting. But we have a very good view of just what comes in, and you can start to see things like in drones coming through, 4 or 5 years ago, the rise of 3D printing, which we wrote about, but then never kind of really cut through, but now is cutting through again with medical and all of those sorts of things. So
prototyping.
We have very smart editors basically who look at this, and our criteria for publishing is that it's genuinely something we haven't seen before. So it has to sort of stack up to be, this is genuinely different. It's genuinely doing something different to what something else, the other things in our universe, and that informs it. So when we were looking for Disrupt the book, we decided it was nice to have 100 innovations. So we have 10,000 on the site, so we had to choose 100, which was already quite hard work. And then in order to choose the chapters, so we have 10 chapters, and we have everything from the sharing economy, entertainment, workplace, communication, education, retail, travel, sustainability, obviously. But we chose the 10 chapters based on the macro issues we we saw in the world at that moment in time. And it's extremely, it's in a way very subjective from our Springwise team and our spotters and our universe, but in another way, our universe is fairly informed, and it's not a bad litmus test in terms of what's happening out there. So so we selected those themes, and of course we also selected themes where we knew we could do it. We had brilliant innovations to talk about.
Of course. One of the things that struck me was, at one time when I was looking at the overview, you have retail and health, which seem to be like sectors. And so is entertainment, by the way. At the same time, within any company, there can be entertainment. And one of the examples that really, I don't remember exactly which one it was, but it was the use of gaming, so that if you did well in a certain game, then you got access to more media, like, it was some publisher. And I love that example. And that really is the kind of example that any company, any sector looking at content could integrate if that was part of their strategy and maybe their wider population.
So the real trick with Springwise, as I have now understood after all these many years in looking at it, is the lateral thinking that it inspires. So where I think, and if you're particularly in big organizations, they are obsessed by their own vertical, their own sector, they're obsessed by their day job. It's very hard to have any time to look outside. And Springwise is the antithesis of that. Springwise spends its whole life looking at things from the lateral point of view, looking at different geographies, looking at different sectors, different verticals, different themes, and looking to cross-connect all of that in order to find a better way forward. And as businesses are being disrupted, and we find this with our consultancy Reset, is we use the Springwise ideas to help kind of big old businesses and corporations think in a way that they've never thought about before. And because these innovations are all real, there's someone doing these things in somewhere around the world, and because they are, they're all telling a certain story. They're not threatening for big corporations because they're little, but they're highly inspiring and energizing. So I guess to come back to your point, what I wanted to do with this kind of set of contents or chapter headings, if you like, is combine sector and theme, and see if I could sort of even in the contents, try to, set an example that is just not about verticals, and we've got one on this industry and that's that industry, but it's about themes that can cross over. So workplace is relevant to everyone, but it's also particularly relevant to people who are supplying offices. So it has those nuances throughout it.
Indeed, and unlike Future Proof, you really didn't go at it from a technological standpoint, in the way we looked at it, of course, we were looking more at the mindset, but we've structured it around technologies. And in reading it, James, as you know, I'm close to this topic, we voluntarily didn't choose to talk about virtual reality, whereas you cited some enormously wonderful cases of VR. And you mentioned drones, which is another topic, or technology that we didn't want to focus in on. But we have to make these choices, and the idea, as you say anyway, is to get them, to think differently about the way they run business.
For me, it's about, as you say, I'm less interested in, in the technology. I mean, I think technologies are they're more enablers than they are, they start as original ideas. But I'll give you an example. So for me, the drone example that I love in the book is this drone called Pouncer, which is a drone that flies into war zones.
Edible.
It takes in supplies and drops them in war zones, which means that it's not going in a plane, so you don't have the risk of a plane chucking stuff out with a parachute, and so there's a risk to the pilots. But when it lands with the supplies, you discover that part of it turns into firewood and another part of it is edible. So actually the wings of the drone are edible. So you kind of, who came up with the edible drone? But it brings you to think about, drones as a force for good rather than just delaying planes at Gatwick. But also, someone has really thought through something that is, potentially going to is a life or death application of this technology. So it's really, really using it as a force for good. And that can, whatever area you're trying to explore, that is a very inspiring and I guess purposeful story. So we try to think about, I guess, the story and the positive change at the heart of it, and why this innovation matters, if you like, and then the technology behind it is not secondary, but it's sort of within that context.
So, James, I thoroughly want everyone who's listening to go out and download Disrupt or buy it on Amazon. More in your other wheelhouse is this notion of digital transformation at Reset. And it's obviously a hot topic, and I would be interested to hear from you in the work that you do on transformation. What are, in your mind, leaders getting wrong when they go about getting transformation? Because so many of these programs are not working.
Yeah, so it's the question. So we have a few golden rules that we, and I would sort of say, I guess, if you don't follow the golden rules, you threaten your programs. The first is it has to be driven from the top of the organization or with real authority and real kind of clout. So, if you haven't got the board or the CEO, we find it's very difficult to push programs into the organization. Secondly, you have to have an element of it outside business as usual. So you can't expect people to do their day jobs and take on a whole lot of other transformation work at the same time. But the third thing, it needs to be connected enough into business as usual in order to be able to come back in. So it needs to be connected into the main part of the business. And where we have seen big sort of failures is where there's a lot of money invested in some startup hub, in some other part of the city that's a bit more cool and groovy. There's a whole load of startups brought in that may be relevant and a lot of money invested in them, but without any real understanding of where the ROI and governance is around that. And so there's some big high profile cases of that just being a complete disaster because there's been no way of governing it. So one of the things that we've developed at Reset is an innovation operating system which has governance, it has board level credentials. My business partner is a private equity trained banker / digital specialist, so we have everything through the lens of the financials as well as my more creative viewpoint. And so when you get the kind of the ingredients of leadership engaged, you're working in an agile manner to get things off the ground. You're lighting small fires of success around the organization. And over time, you shift the culture and the culture changes and you become more of an innovative business, which helps you be resilient, build in resilience and future proofing, as well as in many cases, change your business model in order to be fit for future. So that's maybe a slightly long answer. The key thing is you really do want to be working with a leadership team who is committed to this and not just doing it because they're ticking a box.
In your point number 3, which was about this notion of, I would say, almost outsourcing innovation, there are many models for a big company to try to figure out how to become quicker and more agile, upgrade their innovation cycle, and so on. One of which is becoming part of a accelerator, or, as you said, have this buy a startup in Clerkenwell or something, whatever, and then that's how we're going to become cool. Perhaps every one of these models could work, just like many technologies work. But the issue is the mindset, and they're trying to acquire growth, which is what this amounts to, as opposed to organically creating the mindset and organically having the innovation coming from within. It seems like it's a quick road to nowhere.
So I think you're right in many cases. This is why a lot of these programs fail. I think one of the most important things that we've seen is the importance of the cultural change. So really a lot of this is around creating a shift in culture in an organization to allow it to be more open to transformation and innovation and to be more agile and flexible. So if you believe that the pace of change only continues to accelerate, and you believe that that is going to continue to disrupt any business model, and all the evidence points to that, then the best thing you can have is a very flexible and agile organization with smart people who are, have the license to make the changes and kind of innovate where they need to. And part of the kind of success of that is also being aware of the innovation around the world that's happening. So we find that Springwise, when an organization has a Springwise membership, for example, and they're seeing these innovations coming through every single day, even in the finance team or the legal teams, which are not necessarily so creative, but I don't want to do them a disservice, but who are not in the front line with consumers, they're still seeing all this stuff that's going on around their industry, and they're opening up to change, so that when the debate happens at board level and they're in the room, they're already a little bit down the line. So we do say that intelligence, and so that awareness is really important. The impact of having teams in the business to do stuff. So we will go in and we will do stuff, but we will do that on the proviso that we'll be out after a year or 18 months because we're going to transfer that skill set and that cultural change. And then, businesses do need to invest in it, but they need to invest in a way that is tempered with proper governance and a proper system. So, there are massive examples of big organizations, getting this completely wrong. And then we're very excited to see, particularly amongst some of our clients, some really good success. But you tend to have success starting quite small and then growing over time. And when you see you've disrupted a business model and changed a business that was going downhill to a business that's going uphill, that's extremely gratifying.
It seems that starting small is one of the keys, and then probably making sure how linked it is straight up to the strategy. And then there's this other one, or maybe two. One of them is a little bit of luck and the narrative. And it's not all either rocket science or predictable. There are elements of hazard, and the fit of chemistry is not something you can always anticipate, like you and your partner. So last question for you, James. You've worked in business in a very serious capacity. You have great credentials. You see a lot of interesting companies, and especially with your stock and where we're based in Britain. I was wondering to what extent things like fun and personality and sense of humor, politics, all these things which are typically out of the domain of professional, are relevant in this world that we're living in and as we face transformation.
So one of the great things about what I do now, and I think you would, I hope, say the same about what you do now, is like it's terrific fun. So I'm amazed that I'm still relevant at my old age, and still able to really, really enjoy my work in a way that I haven't before in bigger organizations. So that kind of sense of, I guess, responsibility, accountability, but also autonomy is a really powerful combination, and it allows me and my teams to, the great thing about being a consultant is you're in a helicopter and you're slightly divorced from all the politics and the kind of the stuff that bogs people down. So you can help move much faster than people who are maybe concerned about, what their next promotion is going to be and, what their boss thinks and all of that kind of stuff. So I find that incredibly stimulating and incredibly exciting. I also think that we're leading a very small movement of change, which is really positive and really powerful. As I think I've said to you, we're a member of 1% for the Planet, so we give 1% of our fees and our sales to environmental causes. We're pending to be a B Corporation, so we're not quite big enough yet to be a full member, but we are taking into account those sort of values, which are more than just the making the money. And the other, I think the most exciting things is when you see your partners, your clients succeeding, and also starting to discuss whether they might become a B Corporation as well, and would that be a good outcome? So that ability to influence is terrific fun. We also have the opportunity. We're based in Somerset House in central London, one of the most extraordinary creative communities in London, the largest creative community in London. much better than WeWork, I have to say. And it's also a trust, so it's a charity, which is also much better than WeWork. And we are in a community that is dedicated to the creativity, the arts, to sustainability, heritage, and all of those things. So that it allows us to recruit and retain people who are coming to work for more than just coming to work to make money. And increasingly, and I see this through my kids, that's what's motivating. So in the world in which we live, I think there's going to be dramatic change from generation to generation, and trying to do our bit to set the world in a slightly better track than it is at the moment. And I'm not sure our generation of politicians are necessarily doing that, or business people, but there are examples emerging. The more we can do, and the more we can champion our Springwise innovators and help our teams kind of have a great time and appreciate what we're doing, the better we would be. So the net is I'm having a great time.
Brilliant. Well, so the way I think about it, what you just said is that for businesses, there's no reason, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to allow your staff, your team to feel relevant, have responsibility, and have autonomy, which seem to be the three key points. And I also wanted to give a shout out to our mutual friend, classmate, Roland Whitehead, who's CEO of Kuru, who works at Somerset House. And so hopefully we'll have a chance to powwow together. So James, tell us how, just to give us a wrap up on the best ways to link with you, get your book, find out about Reset, and sign up for a subscription to Springwise. Okay,
so springwise.com, a little thing will pop up and say, would you like to subscribe to our free weekly newsletter? There's a page on Disrupt, which is also available in all good bookstores. Independent bookstores as well as on Amazon. So it's Disrupt: 100 Lessons in Business Innovation by James Bidwell. And then Reset is James at thisisreset.com. So Reset is the consultancy business, and they are my places. I don't do any. We have Twitter and Facebook feeds for the businesses, but not personally for other reasons. So so please contact anytime.
Brilliant, James. Keep on doing what you're doing. Keep that wonderful smile and energy, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Minter. Brilliant.
Thanks for having listened to this recording of the Minter Dialogue Show. You'll find the show notes and other blog posts on minterdial.com. If you enjoyed the show, please like the handy Facebook button, or better yet, head over to iTunes to give a rating and review. But first, relax to Josh Sachs's Finger Paint.
Oh, fill me with all your colors, any different way to rid me of the gray, and heal me with all your imperfections that you mention in your lack of self-security. In our palms make colors blend and look ugly in the end, but they're pretty in their own disgusting values. We'd hang our portraits in the hallways, make our